about relationships, notably from your articles, amazing articles out there. Today we're talking about Black people, UK and race. And what does that look like in 2025? What's been happening? And whatever comes to mind for you, Nigel, would you like to share with us? What are you saying? Black Men Talk, over to you, Nigel.
Well, you said, how's it looking? It's not looking good. It's far from looking, in my opinion. From my observations, I would say it's actually getting worse from what I observe. I mean, especially if you look at online, like online racial abuse, the fact that when President Trump got back in, he persuaded the tech bros, as they call them, like the people who own Facebook and Twitter, etc., to like relax their moderation on hate speech. So I have to remember, like, say back in the 70s, they would say in sociology that it took approximately 5 years for a trend in America to take hold in the UK. Well, now 5 years is more like 5 days with the advent of the internet. So yeah, it's it's not looking good at all.
We talk about the US and the UK and how the UK does seem to be slightly behind the US. Whatever's happening over there, at some point it comes here. We feel connected to them in some way.
I wouldn't say necessarily connected. They have a very different culture in America. I always say that the racism in America tends to be more overt. Here it tends to be more covert. So here they tend to be sneaky, a bit more sneaky. They're not so much in your face. I mean, saying that, I mean, I went on Facebook yesterday and I wasn't on Facebook for 10 minutes and I saw a racist comment.
Really?
Yeah. So, you know, so at the end of the day, and and then there's obviously, and again in America, they're clamping down on DEI programs, diversity, equity and inclusion. So they're clamping down on that there. I was actually watching a report yesterday. There's a company called JL Partners who do research, and they done a survey, and their survey says that almost half of white men are self-censoring at work for fear of causing offence, and 23% of those surveyed believe they were experiencing discrimination because of their race and gender. And you know, sometimes you sigh and you say, oh well. You know, it goes back to there's a book I bought years ago. It's a bestseller. It's called Makes You Wanna Holler. Nathan McCall. It's about racism, and he says basically in there he's observed that when certain white men are put on an equal footing, if they have to compete on a fair basis, they can feel disadvantaged. And then when you look at you can look at either. I mean, if you look at like structure in here, so you look at it and you say, well, okay, there are X amount of black people in the workforce, but then what positions do they hold? Because you'll tend to find that black women are more likely to hold managerial roles than black guys. So then you ask yourself the question, well, why is that? But then obviously, women as a whole tend to be less threatening. If you're in London in the morning and you see, like, you know, lots of black people going to work, the question you have to ask yourself, well, yeah, but what jobs are the guys doing? Are they in management positions, or are they mid-level, or are they security guards, etc.? There's certainly been to my mind, a backlash clearly against like DEI policies in America. Whether that's going to happen here, we will have to wait and see. Because obviously, if you look at the political landscape, you look at the Reform Party and Nigel Farage, and they tend to indulge more in what they call dog whistle politics. So they're not overt. It's very much like kind of, you know, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink kind of calls to racism. I mean, you can look at the Stockport riot last year when there was rioting all over the country after the murder of those children. And the rumour that again started online was an immigrant had just come over on a boat. So all of that kind of misinformation spread online, which led to the riots. But then it turned out the person who committed the crime was born here. Yes, he was a young black man. But yeah, he was born here, brought up here, went to school here. But then obviously from the outcome of that, obviously was a lot of those rioters got very stiff sentences. There's a lady who tweeted, she tweeted something like, oh, deport them all, burn down the hostels, and if that makes me racist, so be it. And her tweet was up for 3.5 hours, then she took it down, but too late, because nothing dies on the internet. And she got 31 months. In fact, she had her appeal last week, which was rejected, because she was charged with inciting racial hatred, which she was. There's no dispute about what she done. But now you have people advocating for her, saying, oh, the sentence is too harsh, she's got children, da 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 da. But at the end of the day, the law's the law. And plus she pleaded guilty. So, she done the tweet, she pleaded guilty, and that was her sentence.
What cases would you see out there with regards to racism in the workplace?
My history was really in that role was, obviously I'm a black man. I'd experienced racism, and that's how I kind of got into that role, because I'd experienced it and I thought, well, I don't want anyone else to go through what I've been through. So I took on that role. The problem that I had was I was too good at what I was doing. Well, that sounds a bit braggadocious. Not necessarily I was very good at what I was doing. I never lost
it doesn't.
No, I never lost a case, but that was more down to the incompetence of management than necessarily the brilliance, because I can read. So, so in the local authorities, like most, obviously, companies, they have policies, yeah? So you have, for example, you'll have a bullying and harassment policy or dignity at work policy, for example. So, but those in certain authorities, certainly the one I was working in, they were just tick box exercises. That's the one issue that was obvious to me. The other problem was that managers were not promoted on merit. They were promoted on the basis of who they went down the pub with after work, or who they may be having an affair with, etc. But the cases I dealt with mostly were racism, because people talk, yeah? So someone's got a problem, they come and see me, I get it sorted out. And then obviously they tell a friend tells a friend, and then it kind of became, if you've got a problem, go and see Nigel. So, and this is voluntary work, mind you, but there were some weekends I'd be at home with 8 or 9 different piles of casework, on a Saturday afternoon, which sadly eventually led to me burning out, because I'm working full time, I'm doing that, I'm doing other things. So, the cases were, the majority of cases I dealt with were racism. That up to employment tribunal level. So I never attended a tribunal, but it's just paperwork. Yeah, so for example, case is heard, we win the case. So then the issue is now, what remedy are they going to offer? So then management say, okay, Nigel, we'll offer your member £5,000, for example. But then I go back to the member, and the member might say, well, no, I want more. Or they might say yes. But all this goes through the employment tribunal. So basically, management give me the offer, I send that to the tribunal, and then the tribunal contacts management. Yeah, so it's all that palaver.
In terms of the racism, someone is just listening, tuning in right now, the racism cases, what did they look like the data? I know you can't go into a specific case. What was that about? What was the issue?
It was
why they were going to you.
Often it was the case, obviously racism at work.
Yeah, what does
Oh,
racism at work
all right.
look
Giving
like,
giving
Nigel?
giving someone tasks that are impossible to complete, or overloading them with work, or treating them differently in team meetings, or not inviting their input in team meetings. So, but the more, I suppose, prevalent cases were the fact that disproportionate punishment. So you could have a white employee who's done something and they'll get a slap on the wrist. But if a black employee done exactly the same thing, they would throw the book at them. In the McPherson report came out, so after Stephen Lawrence sadly got murdered in 1993, I believe, then there was the McPherson report that came out 6 years later or something like that. But the bottom line was, even though the McPherson report focused on the police, because that's where the term institutionally racist came from. It came from that report. So even though it was focused on the police, it also had sections about housing, which is where I worked. I worked in the housing department. And it said in the report that in local authorities, exactly what I just said, that black staff tend to be disproportionately punished harsher than their white colleagues.
Unfair treatment.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So at the end of the day, as I said, it was it was interesting work. It was something I believed in. So I was very passionate about the work I'd done. I was a very big Malcolm X fan, still am. In fact, it was this month is 100 years of he'd be 100 years, well, if he was alive, he'd be 100 years old, because he was born in May 1925.
Wow, that's interesting, because we are looking at leaders and celebrating our leaders. So Malcolm X, he's 100th year. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah,
thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, well, there's been some celebrations about that milestone, obviously in America, in the black community, but we haven't. I mean, obviously there've been very high profile black leaders in America. Obviously Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. Then you had the Black Panthers, Fred Hampton. But our I'm not sure if, there used to be years ago, there used to be a musical called Black Heroes in the Hall of Fame, which celebrated, obviously, black heroes, and does what it says on the tin, which was good. But I don't think our leaders are necessarily celebrated in the same way that they are in America. I'm not quite sure why that is, to be quite honest, but yeah, but we've had some people here who've done some very good work. Like Darcus Howe, he had a show on TV called the Devil's Advocate, and he was a civil rights activist, and he campaigned against some police brutality.
In the UK, some say it's worse than the US, and also they said that they think the UK is worse than the US because we don't see it, which is what you said. We don't see it. It's not as open as it is in the US. So they're saying that they think it's worse because we gone to sleep, what one of the listeners said. I
don't like to generalise, as you know, but I would tend to agree. Right. What the thing that I've looked at, obviously I knew we were going to be talking about this, and I kind of looked at the fact that the term black community is quite an interesting term, because I'm sure I heard Femi Banadok, the leader of the Conservative Party, she said something on the lines as, there's no such thing as the black community. And I thought, that's an interesting opinion. I'd never really thought about it like that before. But then, but I think the problem that we have is we don't have representation in the sense of an organisation. So if you look at, for example, here, you've got like the Muslim Council of Britain. Now, they had some issues with the government, and they were started in 1997, but they had a few issues with the government. So the government, other Muslim groups, such as, for example, so that's the Muslim Engagement and Development organisation. MEND, for example. So that's the Muslim Engagement and Development Organisation. So there are groups to represent Muslims that can interact with the government. Then you've got the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and that's been going centuries, started in the 1700s, right? But they liaise with the British government on behalf of the British Jewish community, okay? And if you look in America, they've got the NAACP, so they've got which is the National Association of Advancement of Coloured People, and that's been going since the early 1900s, right? But here we don't have such an organisation. I don't know. I couldn't tell you why, because to be honest, I don't know. But I just observe the fact that other groups have organisations that can speak on behalf of the community when something happens. So say, for example, there's an incident of obvious racism and it's a high profile case. There is no organisation that can speak on behalf of the black community in the UK. Now, but you could argue that when you look at the other organisations, they have a religious kind of basis, like British Muslims or the Jewish organisation, but those are religions. So I don't know whether the religious aspect is a factor. It's something that I'd have to look into.
Lacking representation now, but some people are saying that UK British are so busy just integrating and just chasing others, trying to fit in. That's what some people say, that we are here, just putting that out there, that we're here trying to fit in, where we're never going to be accepted. And that is what is causing us this exhaustion. And there's lots of issues happening for black people regarding mental health.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you what did you just say? Exhaustion. It's always instructive to see what the right wing are doing. So in America right now, talking about exhaustion, there's a term going around called black fatigue, right? It's called black fatigue, right? And it's interesting how the right wing always flips these things. So Black Fatigue is a book written by a female author that was published in 2020, and basically it talks about black fatigue in terms of the struggles that black people have to go through dealing with racism, basically. So but now it's been morphed into this thing about, now white people are saying they've got black fatigue because they're tired of black people. Then you've got black people saying they've got black fatigue because of other black people. So it's interesting how language morphs, kind of thing. But then so black fatigue is it talks about exhaustion, which is the word you use, with small acts of aggression and disrespect black people have to put up with on a daily basis. But then again, if you look at the word woke, right? So woke, and originally it was from African American culture, which basically meant being aware and attentive to issues of social injustice. Basically, people on the right, if they're racist, they're going to use it in a negative connotation. Disney's too woke. Then you have the issue with if they put black characters in a movie, that's too woke. So they're always complaining. The right wing are always complaining, but it is what it is.
And listener also has just said that the Black UK conversation is a conversation that's ongoing, and there's so many different layers to it. And certainly there is, both agree.
That's very
Loads
true.
of layers to this conversation. Some say that we are programmed, because what you talk about with the black fatigue, with regards to how we are with each other, and we talk about that, certainly I share some narratives around that, how we are with one another. So we've got to deal with the racism, and then we've got to deal with each other. as well. So any thoughts, Nigel? Any thoughts about how some people say, for example, the black on black crime? That's another area I wanted to talk to you about, black on black crime. Now, people are saying there is no such thing as black on black crime. Other races, the crime happens. But the black on black crime is an agenda so that we can feel a certain way about ourselves, that we are the violent ones in society, and the racism. Some people say that black people are complaining. The race things are different, things are better. That's what some people won't say publicly. Some non-black people have said that, and even some black people say that racism is not, it's not bad like it was.
Oh, it's not. It's not from a historical perspective. So if you look at it from a historical perspective, yes, things are better than when they were when the Windrush generation started coming here in 1948. So they were met with overt racism. So if they're looking for a rent accommodation, it was common to see signs that said "No Irish, no dogs, no blacks," or "No Irish, no blacks, no dogs." Right, that was common. So it was very overt. And then obviously you had parties like the National Front. So yes, I think things have moved on since those times. But at the same time, you have to look at it and say, well, yes, things have moved on, but it's certainly not a utopia. And now, because of like issues in this country in terms of not immigration, but illegal immigration. Obviously, the Reform Party, which is right wing, they've just had really good local election results. So it's better, but don't be fooled just because they're not signs saying no blacks, no Irish, no dogs in people's windows doesn't mean things are better.
It doesn't. But Nigel, let me get on to then. One of our special listeners has sent with regard to the word black and what that could mean for us, calling ourselves black. We're constantly hearing ourselves saying black, but what's the actual meaning of black? So the fact that we're saying black all the time as a people, can that be part of the program?
Right. Okay. So at the end of the day, the terms black, white, etc., they are social and political constructs. And if you actually, again, you have to take the historical perspective. So I've got a book called Black Over White, European Attitudes to the Negro from the 1800s to the early 1900s. Basically, the bottom line is, of course, Caucasians, what they decided to classify people by race, and obviously they put themselves at the top as being the best, and they put black people at the bottom. That's basically what happened. You know, it's a lot more complicated than that, but that was the outcome. So basically, the term black is a social construct. So, and political construct as well, because at the end of the day, if you're going to look at, say, we have every few years we have the national census. So obviously when you get your census form, it says how do you identify black Caribbean, black African, So if you take that example, you can look at it and say, okay, yeah, well, obviously it's a social construct. I think the problem, going back to something you said earlier, I think part of the problem is that yes, we have black people in this country, but then there is still this kind of internal division. So someone might say, oh, I come from Jamaica. Someone else says, oh, I come from Barbados. Someone else says, oh, I come from Antigua. Someone else says, oh, I come from Nigeria or Lagos or whatever. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, as Malcolm X said, if you get stopped by the police and they start harassing you, they don't care if you're Christian, Baptist, or whatever religion you may follow. As far as they're concerned, you're black, right? And they're going to give you problems on the basis of your race.